The ink on the parchment wasn't even dry when the guards came for her. Lady Kate Vance didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked across the candlelight at the man she loved, Sebastian Thorne, the ruthless Duke of Albury. He was the one holding the quill. He was the one who had just signed her life away. "You are banished from London," he said, his voice cold as steel. "If you return, you will hang." She thought he was a monster. She thought he was discarding her to save his own reputation. She was wrong. He wasn't sending her away to destroy her. He was sending her away because the king had just ordered her execution, and this was the only way to keep her alive. But neither of them knew that the true war was just beginning. London, 1824. The rain battered the windows of the Albury estate, sounding like handfuls of gravel thrown against the glass. Inside the mahogany-panelled study, the air was suffocatingly hot, thick with the scent of beeswax and stale tobacco. Lady Kate Vance stood in the centre of the room. Her hem was soaked with mud, her hair plastered to her forehead. She was shivering, but not from the cold. She was shivering from the look in Sebastian Thorne's eyes. Sebastian, the Duke of Albury, stood by the fireplace. He was a man composed of sharp angles and sharper intellect, known throughout England as the King's Shadow. Tonight, however, he looked less like a man and more like a statue carved from ice. "Did you do it?" he asked. His voice was devoid of the warmth that had been there only last night when his hands had been tangled in her hair, promising her the world. "Sebastian, please." Kate stepped forward, her hands trembling. "You cannot believe them. You know me. I would never betray the crown. I simply found the letters. I didn't write them." Sebastian turned away from the fire. His face was a mask. "The letters were found in your vanity, Kate. They detail a plot to overthrow King George. They bear your seal." "Wah!" "It was planted," Kate cried out, the injustice burning her throat. "Lady Genevieve, she has the ear of the court. She has wanted me gone since the season began because she knows you favor me." "Favor?" Sebastian let out a dry, humorless laugh. He walked to his massive oak desk and picked up a piece of parchment. "Do you think favor matters when treason is on the table the Privy Council has already met? The king is in a rage. He wants a head on a spike by morning to set an example." Kate's knees felt weak. "And you, what do you want, Sebastian?" He looked down at the paper. His jaw tightened a muscle, feathering near his ear, the only sign of the turmoil raging inside him. He knew she was innocent. He knew Genevieve, with her connections to the French court, was the likely culprit. But he had no proof, and King George was not a man who waited for proof. He wanted blood. If Sebastian fought for her now publicly, they would both die. If he claimed her innocence without evidence, he would be stripped of his title, and she would be executed before sunrise. There was only one move left on the chessboard, a move that would make her hate him forever, but would keep her heart beating. "I have negotiated a mercy," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Kate's eyes widened with hope. "You convinced him?" "I convinced him that executing a woman of your standing would cause a riot among the commoners who adore your charity work. I convinced him that exile is a fate worse than death for a socialite." Kate froze. "Exile?" Sebastian dipped the quill into the inkwell. The scratch of the nib against the paper sounded like a scream in the quiet room. "You are to leave London tonight. You will go to Blackwood Manor in the Scottish Highlands. You will remain there under house arrest. You are stripped of your titles. You are stripped of your dowry. And you are stripped of your association with me. Sebastian, sign it," he commanded, sliding the paper across the desk. "Or the guards outside will take you to the tower." Kate walked to the desk. She looked at the man she had loved for 3 years, the man she had planned to marry in secret. He wouldn't even meet her eyes. He was looking at the bookshelf, cold and detached. "I thought you loved me," she whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "Love has no place in politics, Lady Vance," he said. She grabbed the quill her hand, shaking so violently she barely recognized her own signature. She threw the quill down, turning on her heel. "Get out," Sebastian said, finally looking at her. His blue eyes were dark, unreadable. "And Kate, if you return to London, I will not save you a second time." She fled the room, the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind her. As soon as she was gone, the Duke of Albury collapsed into his chair. He put his head in his hands, his fingers gripping his hair until his knuckles turned white. He let out a ragged breath, a sound of pure agony. "Forgive me, my love," he whispered to the empty room. "Forgive me." 6 months had passed. Blackwood Manor lived up to its name. Perched on a jagged cliff overlooking a churning grey sea, the estate was a crumbling fortress of dark stone and draughty corridors. The wind never stopped howling. It was a place where hope went to die. Kate had changed. The soft, laughing girl who danced in London ballrooms was gone. In her place was a woman made of silence and resentment. She wore simple wool dresses, her hands rough. From tending to the small garden she tried to keep alive against the salt spray. She had only 2 companions, Mrs. Higgins, a deaf housekeeper who cooked flavourless stews, and Thomas, a young stable boy who had been bribed by Sebastian to ensure she didn't escape. Every day, Kate stood on the cliffs watching the southern horizon. She wasn't looking for rescue. She was looking for revenge. She spent her nights reading the few books left in the library, specifically focusing on law and history. She replayed the events of that night in her head 1,000 times. The letters, the seal, Lady Genevieve's smirk at the opera 2 nights prior. Kate knew she had been played. But what hurt the most wasn't the political maneuvering. It was Sebastian, the ease with which he had discarded her. One Tuesday afternoon, a rider approached the manor. Kate was in the garden, pulling weeds from a patch of struggling turnips. She stood up, shielding her eyes against the pale sun. It wasn't a royal guard. It was a private courier. The man dismounted, looking exhausted. "Lady Vance, I have no title here," she said sharply. "I have a letter. It was smuggled out of London. I was told to give it only to you." Kate took the sealed envelope. It didn't bear the Duke's seal. It bore the crest of the Sterling family, her cousin Captain James Sterling, one of the few men in London she trusted. She broke the wax seal her heart, hammering against her ribs. "Kate, do not trust the silence. London is burning. The king is ill and the vultures are circling. Genevieve has been named the king's personal confidant. But that is not why I write. I write because of the Duke. They say he has gone mad. He has challenged 3 men to duels in the last month, all men who spoke ill of you. He attends no parties. He refuses to court. And Kate, rumours are swirling in the barracks. The king didn't just want you gone because of the treason letters. He wanted you gone because your father, before he died, left a journal. A journal that proves King George is not the rightful heir. They think you have it. The banishment wasn't a punishment, Kate. It was a waiting game. They are waiting for you to get careless and reveal where the journal is hidden. And the Duke, he isn't your jailer. He's the only thing standing between you and an assassin's blade. He blocked the order for your execution 3 times last week alone. Stay hidden. Trust no one." James Kate dropped the letter, the paper fluttering into the mud. The wind whipped her hair across her face. He hadn't betrayed her. He was protecting her. Sebastian. She breathed the realization, hitting her like a physical blow. The coldness, the cruelty, it had been a performance. He had to make the king believe he despised her, or the king would have used Sebastian to get to her. But the relief was short-lived. If James was right, the king was losing patience. Suddenly the sound of hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Not one horse this time, a dozen. Kate ran to the edge of the courtyard. On the ridge silhouetted against the grey sky were 12 riders clad in the crimson and gold livery of the Royal Guard. They weren't here to deliver mail, they were drawing swords. "Thomas!" Kate screamed, running toward the stables. "Get the horses!" The stable boy stumbled out, eyes wide. "My lady, we have to run, now. But the Duke's orders." "The Duke isn't here to save us. Thomas, look!" She pointed to the ridge. The soldiers were descending the hill, their armor glinting. They were less than a mile away. Kate grabbed a saddle. She wasn't the pampered socialite anymore. She was a woman who had survived 6 months of hell, and she wasn't going to die today. She had to get back to London. She had to find the journal her father had hidden, a journal she hadn't even known existed until this moment. And she had to save Sebastian before he got himself killed for her. "Where are we going?" Thomas shouted over the wind as they mounted the horses. Kate kicked her horse into a gallop, heading not toward the road, but toward the dangerous mountain pass that the locals claimed was haunted. It was the only way the soldiers wouldn't follow. "We're going to London! Thomas!" She yelled back, her eyes hard. "I have a king to dethrone." The Scottish Highlands were not forgiving to fugitives. For 3 days and 3 nights, Kate and Thomas rode hard, keeping to the goat paths and ancient drover roads that snaked through the mist. The weather was a relentless enemy. Freezing rain turned the ground to slurry, and the wind bit through their cloaks like invisible teeth. Kate's hands, once manicured and soft, were now raw and blistered from gripping the reins. She slept in snatches, her back against damp moss, one hand resting on the small dagger she had stolen from the Blackwood kitchens. "We need to stop, my lady." Thomas gasped on the 4th morning. His horse was foaming at the mouth, its sides heaving. "The beasts, they'll die." Kate looked back. The horizon was empty, a vast expanse of grey heather and stone. But she could feel them. The 12 riders. They weren't just soldiers. They moved with the precision of hunters. "We rest for an hour," Kate conceded, sliding off her mare. Her legs nearly buckled. "But do not light a fire." They huddled under the shelter of a rocky overhang. Thomas broke a piece of stale bread, handing half to her. He was young, barely 17, with a face full of freckles that looked out of place in this grim survival. "Why do they want you dead?" Thomas asked quietly. "The Duke. He sent money for your keep. He sent letters demanding you be treated well. If he wanted you dead, he could have just stopped sending coin." "The Duke isn't the one chasing us, Thomas," Kate said, chewing the hard bread. "It's the people who are afraid of what the Duke knows, and what I might know." "What do you know?" Kate looked at the dagger in her lap. "I know that power is a fragile thing, and I know my father died for a secret I haven't even solved yet." A twig snapped. It was a sound so small it should have been lost in the wind, but Kate's nerves were pulled tight as piano wire. She signaled Thomas to be silent. From the fog below, their ridge, a horse snorted. "They found us," Thomas whispered, panic rising in his voice. "Mount up!" Kate hissed. They scrambled onto their exhausted horses, just as the first rider emerged from the mist. He wasn't wearing the Royal Guard crimson anymore. He had stripped off his identifying cloak. He wore black leather and chain mail. A mercenary. "There she is!" the man shouted, drawing a heavy broadsword. "The bitch is on the ridge! Go!" Kate screamed, kicking her mare. The chase began anew, But this time the terrain was deadly. They were galloping along a narrow spine of rock with a sheer drop on either side. The hooves clattered violently on the slate. An arrow whizzed past Kate's ear, slicing a lock of her hair. Another struck Thomas's saddlebag. "They aren't trying to capture us," Thomas yelled. "They're shooting to kill." "I know," Kate shouted back. Ahead, the path narrowed to a crumbling stone bridge over a roaring gorge. It was old Roman stonework, barely wide enough for a single horse. "Cross it," Kate commanded. Thomas went first. The horse skitted stones tumbling into the abyss, but he made it. Kate followed. As she reached the middle of the arch, the lead mercenary reached the edge of the ravine. He didn't slow down. He spurred his massive black stallion to jump the gap where the bridge had started to crumble. He'd landed on the bridge behind Kate. His horse collided with the rear of hers. Kate was thrown forward, slamming into her horse's neck. She gasped, the air knocked out of her. The mercenary laughed, raising his sword. He was close enough that she could smell the sour wine on his breath. "Lady Genevieve sends her regards," he sneered. Genevieve. The name sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through Kate's veins. It wasn't the king. It was the woman who wanted Sebastian for herself. Kate didn't think. She didn't pray. She reached into her boot, pulled out the small kitchen dagger, and as the mercenary swung his sword down, she jammed the blade into the soft nose of his stallion. The horse reared in pain, twisting violently on the narrow, slick stone. The mercenary lost his balance. He flailed, grabbing at the air, but the horse's panic was too great. With a terrifying scream, both man and beast slipped over the edge. Kate watched them fall, vanishing into the white spray of the river, hundreds of feet below. She sat frozen for a second, her heart hammering like a trapped bird. "My lady!" Thomas was screaming from the other side. "The others!" 3 more riders were approaching the bridge. Kate spurred her horse, scrambling up the muddy bank to the other side. "Push the stones!" she yelled at Thomas. Together they dismounted and shoved a massive loose boulder at the bridge's anchor point. With a groan of earth and rock, the ancient keystone gave way. The center of the bridge collapsed into the gorge just as the other mercenaries reached the edge. They were trapped on the other side. Kate stood, panting, mud streaked across her face, looking across the chasm at the men who wanted her dead. She wasn't trembling anymore. "Let's go, Thomas," she said, her voice dropping an octave hard and unrecognizable. "We have a long ride to London." London was drowning in fog. It was a week later when Kate and Thomas rode into the city, hidden in the back of a hay cart they had bartered for outside of Leeds. The capital felt different. The streets were quieter, the tension palpable. Posters were plastered on the brick walls, reward for information on traitors. King George's illness had made him paranoid, and his paranoia had made the city a prison. Kate parted ways with Thomas at the outskirts of the city, giving him her last gold ring. "Go to your family in Cheapside," she told him. "Do not speak of me. If I survive this, I will come for you." Now she was alone. She made her way to a safe house in Covent Garden, the home of her old nursemaid Martha. Martha nearly fainted when she saw the gaunt, mud-stained woman on her doorstep, but she ushered Kate in and drew the blinds. "Child, you must be mad," Martha whispered as she scrubbed the grime from Kate's hair in a tin tub. "The Duke. The city says he is to be married." Kate froze, the washcloth dripping in her hand. "Married. Tonight. The king is hosting a masquerade at the palace. They say King George will announce the engagement of the Duke of Albury to Lady Genevieve. It is the only way to solidify the Duke's loyalty, the king says." Kate felt a coldness spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the bathwater. Sebastian was marrying her, the woman who had tried to kill Kate, the woman who had framed her. "He does it to survive," Kate whispered to herself. He thinks I am safe in Scotland. He thinks he is playing the long game. You cannot go there, Kate, Martha warned. The palace is swarming with guards. If you are recognized, I won't be recognized, Kate said, standing up. The water cascaded off her scarred skin. I am not Lady Kate Vance anymore. I am a ghost, and ghosts can walk through walls. The royal palace was a glittering jewel against the dark night. Hundreds of carriages lined the cobblestones, delivering the aristocracy in their velvet finery. Inside the ballroom was a sea of masks, Venetian gold peacock feathers, ominous black silk. Kate entered through the servants' kitchens, slipping into a stolen gown she had taken from the laundry piles, a dark crimson dress that belonged to a countess who was indisposed with a little help from Martha's sleeping draught. She wore a full-face mask of black lace that covered everything but her eyes and mouth. She moved through the crowd like smoke. The music was loud, a string quartet playing a frantic waltz, but underneath the laughter, Kate heard the whispers. The Duke looks like a man walking to the gallows. Genevieve has won, hasn't she? The king eats out of her hand. Kate scanned the room, and then she saw him. Sebastian stood near the king's dais. He looked older. His face was gaunt, his cheekbones sharp enough to cut. He was dressed in black velvet, no ornaments, no medals. He held a glass of wine that he didn't drink. Beside him, clutching his arm with a possessive grip, was Lady Genevieve. She was radiant in silver, wearing a mask of white diamonds. Sebastian looked miserable. He looked like a man who had hollowed himself out so that nothing could hurt him anymore. The music changed. A slow, mournful waltz began. "My lord," Genevieve purred loud enough for the nearby nobles to hear. "Shall we dance? It is our night, after all." Sebastian didn't look at her. "I am not in the mood for dancing. The king is watching Sebastian." She hissed her smile, never wavering. "Dance with me, or I whisper in his ear that your banished lover might need an accident in Scotland." Sebastian stiffened. He set his glass down. He bowed stiffly and led her to the floor. Kate felt a surge of rage so potent it nearly blinded her. She pushed through the crowd. She had to get to him, but she couldn't make a scene, not yet. She waited. As the dance turned, partners swapped. It was a custom of the masquerade. At the signal of the flute, the gentleman turned to the lady on their left. Kate timed it perfectly. She glided onto the floor, cutting in just as the flute trilled. She stepped in front of a startled baron and found herself face to chest with the Duke of Albury. Sebastian looked down, annoyed at the interruption. He took her hand mechanically. His hand was warm. The touch sent a shock-wave through Kate's body. They began to move. "I do not know you, madame," Sebastian said, his voice weary. "You know me," Kate whispered. She kept her voice low, altering the cadence. "You know the ghosts you created." Sebastian missed a step. His grip on her waist tightened instantly. He looked into the eyes behind the black lace. His pupils dilated. He stopped breathing. "Impossible," he breathed. The word was barely a sound. "Kate." "Keep dancing," she commanded softly. "Genevieve is watching." Sebastian forced his legs to move, spinning her into the crowd away from the dais. His composure was shattering. His hands were trembling against her waist. "What are you doing here?" He hissed, his voice a mix of fury and terror. "I sent you away to save you if they see you. They sent assassins." "Sebastian," she cut him off. "Genevieve sent 12 men to Blackwood. They didn't come to arrest me. They came to bury me." Sebastian's face went white. The blood drained from his lips. She told me you were safe. She swore it on the Bible. She lied. She wants me dead so she can have you. And she wants you because she thinks you can control the king." Kate stepped closer, her body pressed against his. To the onlookers it was a passionate embrace. In reality, it was a desperate war council. "My father's journal, Sebastian, the one the king fears. Do you know where it is?" "No one knows. Your father died before he could speak." "I know where it is." Kate lied. She didn't, not yet. But she had a hunch, a memory from her childhood that had surfaced during the long ride south. "But I need time. You cannot marry her. The announcement is in 10 minutes. Sebastian said, his eyes darting to the king who sat slumped on his throne, looking pale and sickly. "If I refuse, I am branded a traitor. I have no leverage." "Then we make leverage," Kate whispered. "Take me to the balcony. Now." Sebastian spun her toward the open French doors. They slipped out into the cool night air of the balcony, hidden by heavy velvet curtains. As soon as they were alone, Sebastian pulled off his mask and hers. He cupped her face in his hands, staring at her, as if she were a miracle. He ran his thumbs over her cheekbones, checking for reality. "You're alive," he choked out. He pulled her into a crushing kiss, a kiss desperate with 6 months of grief and longing. Kate melted into him, the hardness of the journey fading for just a moment. But the moment was broken by the sound of applause from inside. "My lords and ladies," the royal herald boomed. "His Majesty King George demands your attention for a royal announcement regarding the Duke of Albury." Sebastian pulled back his eyes wild. "I have to go back in. If I am not there—" "Go," Kate said, putting her mask back on. "Stall them. Create a scene. Do whatever you must. I am going to the king's private study." "You can't. The king is in the ballroom, but the guards." "The guards are watching the entrances, not the interior corridors," Kate said. "I'm going to find the proof that destroys Genevieve. Just give me 10 minutes. And if you get caught—" Kate looked at him, her eyes fierce behind the lace. "Then I die in London, fighting for us rather than in Scotland alone." Sebastian grabbed her hand one last time. 10 minutes. If you aren't back, I will burn this palace to the ground to find you." He turned and strode back into the ballroom, placing his mask back on. Kate watched him go, then hitched up her stolen dress and climbed over the stone railing of the balcony, leaping toward the trellis that led to the upper royal apartments. The dance was over. The heist had begun. The climb was grueling. The trellis was slick with the evening mist, and the thorns of the climbing roses tore at Kate's stolen gown and the skin of her arms. But she didn't feel the pain. She only felt the terrifying rhythm of the seconds ticking away. She pulled herself over the stone ledge of the third-floor window and tumbled onto a plush Persian rug. She was in the king's private study. The room was dimly lit by a single dying fire. It smelled of camphor, stale medicine, and something rotting, the smell of a sickness that had been allowed to fester. Kate scanned the room. It was exactly as she remembered from her childhood, when her father, the late Earl of Vance, would bring her here while he met with the king. The heavy oak desk, the velvet drapes, and in the corner, the antique ivory chess set on a marble table. The king always protects his Queen Kate, her father had told her once, laughing as he moved a piece. But the smartest men hide their secrets where the game ends. Where the game ends. Kate ran to the chess table. The pieces were set in mid-game. White was losing. She felt under the heavy marble lip of the table. Her fingers brushed against a cold iron latch. Click. A hidden drawer beneath the board sprang open. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, were 2 bundles. The first was her father's journal. She recognized the handwriting instantly. She flipped it open. It wasn't a lineage chart, questioning the king's birthright as the rumors suggested. It was a log of visitors. May 4th, Lady Genevieve visited the king. He fell ill an hour later. May 12th. Genevieve brought tea. The king's speech is slurring. June 1st, I have found the bottle in her chambers. Arsenic. Small doses. She is killing him slowly to rule through a regent. Kate gasped. Her father hadn't been killed for questioning the king's blood. He had been killed because he discovered the king was being poisoned. She grabbed the second bundle. It was a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon. She untied them, and her blood ran cold. They were correspondence between Lady Genevieve and the French spy master, Comte de Vaudreuil. The king is weak. The Duke of Albury is the only obstacle. Once I marry him, I will control the military. The invasion can begin in autumn. Kate stuffed the documents into the bodice of her dress. She had the smoking gun. She had enough to hang Genevieve for high treason 12 times over. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaked open. Kate dove behind the heavy velvet curtains of the window, pressing herself against the cold glass. 2 figures entered. One was a tall, burly man, Sir Roderick, the captain of the King's Guard, a man known for his brutality. The other was a slight, hunched figure, the royal physician. "Is he sedated?" Roderick grunted. "He is," the physician whispered, his voice trembling. "I gave him the tincture Lady Genevieve prepared. He will be pliable for the announcement. He will nod when told and sign where pointed. But Roderick, the dose is too high. He may not wake up tomorrow." "He doesn't need to wake up tomorrow," Roderick said, a sneer evident in his voice. "He only needs to last until the Duke says I do. Once Albury is married to Genevieve, she becomes the power behind the throne. The king becomes redundant." Kate clamped her hand over her mouth to stop a scream. They were going to kill the king tonight. "Come," Roderick said. "We must help get the body to the balcony for the announcement." The 2 men left. Kate waited 3 heartbeats, then scrambled out from the curtains. She didn't go back out the window. There was no time to climb down. She had to go through the palace. She had to run through the corridors, swarming with the very guards who wanted her dead. She opened the door and sprinted into the hallway. "Hey, you there!" A guard at the end of the corridor turned, spotting her running figure. Kate didn't stop. She hitched up her skirts and ran as if the hounds of hell were snapping at her heels. She took a sharp left, then a right, heading toward the servants' stairs that led directly to the ballroom. "Stop her!" Whistles blew behind her. Heavy boots thundered on the floorboards. She reached the top of the grand staircase, overlooking the ballroom, just as the music stopped below. The ballroom was silent. The air was thick with anticipation. King George sat on the throne upon the dais. He looked like a wax doll melting in the heat. His skin was grey, his eyes glassy and unfocused. Lady Genevieve stood beside him, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder, or perhaps holding him upright. Sebastian stood at the foot of the dais. He felt like a man standing before a firing squad. He scanned the room, his eyes darting to the balcony where he had left Kate. The curtains were still. She wasn't back. 10 minutes were up. "My lords and ladies," Genevieve spoke, her voice ringing clear like a bell. "His Majesty has a joyous proclamation. Tonight we unite the strength of the crown with the strength of the military." She nudged the king. The king's head lolled. Then he mumbled, "Unite? Yes. I give you the betrothal." Genevieve continued, smiling triumphantly at Sebastian. "Of myself, Lady Genevieve of Sussex, to his grace, Sebastian Thorne, Duke of Albury." The crowd erupted into polite, confused applause. They sensed the strangeness, but no one dared speak against the king's favourite. Genevieve stepped down the stairs, extending her hand toward Sebastian. "Take my hand, my lord, and seal our future." Sebastian looked at her hand. It was the hand that had signed Kate's death warrant. He looked at the king, seeing the sweat beading on the monarch's brow, the unnatural dilation of his pupils. poison. The realization hit him. If he took her hand, he saved his own life, but he damned England, and he lost Kate forever. Sebastian straightened his spine. He placed his hand on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. "No," he said. The word was not shouted, but it carried through the silent room like a gunshot. The applause died instantly. Genevieve's smile froze. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace." "I said a no." Sebastian raised his voice, turning to face the crowd. "I will not marry this woman, and I will not stand by while she puppets a sick king. Treason!" Genevieve shrieked, her mask of civility shattering. "He defies the king. Arrest him, kill him where he stands." Sir Roderick, the traitorous captain, drew his sword and leaped from the side of the dais. "You heard her, take him!" 4 guards rushed Sebastian. Sebastian didn't hesitate. He drew his blade, a glittering arc of steel under the chandeliers. He wasn't just a duke. He was a veteran of the Peninsular War. He parried Roderick's first savage blow sparks, flying as steel met steel. He spun, kicking a second guard in the chest, sending him crashing into a table of champagne flutes. "The king is drugged," Sebastian roared, blocking another strike. "Look at him. He cannot even speak." The crowd screamed and scrambled back, overturning chairs. The ballroom descended into chaos. "Silence him!" Genevieve screamed, pointing a finger. "Cut his throat." Sebastian was good, but he was 1 against 5. Roderick lunged his sword, slicing across Sebastian's upper arm. Blood bloomed on the white sleeve of his shirt. Sebastian gritted his teeth, driving his shoulder into Roderick, knocking the big man back. But 2 more guards were closing in from behind. He was going to die. He knew it. He had bought Kate time, but he had run out of his own. He prepared for the final blow, raising his sword for a last, desperate defense. "Stop!" The scream came from the top of the grand staircase. Every eye in the room turned upward. Standing at the top of the stairs, framed by the golden archway, was a woman in a torn crimson dress, her hair wild, her face smeared with soot and dirt. She looked like an avenging angel rising from the ashes. "Kate," Sebastian whispered, blood dripping from his arm. Lady Genevieve went pale. You're dead." Kate Vance raised the bundle of papers high in the air. "I am very much alive, Genevieve, and I have the king's own seal to prove that you are the traitor." "She lies!" Genevieve screamed, panic edging into her voice. "Shoot her! Someone shoot her!" A musketeer on the balcony raised his rifle, aiming directly at Kate's heart. "Drop the papers, Lady Vance!" the musketeer shouted. Kate didn't flinch. She looked directly at Sebastian. "I told you, my love, I'm not leaving London again." "Shoot her!" Genevieve commanded. The musketeer's finger tightened on the trigger. Bang! The gunshot echoed through the cavernous hall. Kate didn't fall. Instead, the musketeer on the balcony crumpled his rifle, clattering to the floor. Behind him, stepping out from the shadows of the velvet drapes, stood Captain James Sterling. Kate's cousin Smoke, rising from his pistol. "Sorry I'm late, Kate," James shouted down. "Traffic was murder." Kate took a deep breath and began to descend the stairs, her eyes locked on Genevieve. "The game is over, Genevieve. Checkmate." The silence that followed the gunshot was absolute, the smell of gunpowder mixed with the heavy scent of expensive perfume and fear. Kate continued her descent down the grand staircase. She did not run. She walked with the regality of a queen returning to her throne. Her eyes were fixed on Sir Roderick, who stood between her and the king, his sword dripping with Sebastian's blood. "Seize her!" Genevieve shrieked, her voice cracking. "She is a fugitive. She has threatened the king's life." Roderick growled a low, animalistic sound and turned away from the wounded Sebastian to charge at the stairs. He saw an easy target, an unarmed woman in a dress. "Kate, run!" Sebastian roared. Ignoring the agony in his slashed arm, he lunged forward. He threw himself at Roderick's legs, tackling the massive captain to the polished floor. The two men crashed down in a tangle of limbs and steel. Roderick was stronger, uninjured, and fueled by the desperation of a man who knows his coup is failing. He kicked Sebastian in the ribs, a sickening crack echoing through the hall, and scrambled to his feet, raising his heavy sword for a killing blow on the prone Duke. "No," Kate screamed, freezing halfway down the stairs. But before the blade could fall, a shadow detached itself from the crowd. It was Lord Holloway, an elderly veteran who had served with Sebastian's father. Then another. Then three more. The nobility, shocked out of their fear by Kate's arrival and Sebastian's sacrifice, drew their ceremonial swords. "Stand down, Roderick," Holloway barked. Roderick hesitated, the blade hovering inches from Sebastian's chest. In that split second of hesitation, James Sterling leaped from the balcony, swinging down on a velvet curtain like a pirate landing boots. First on the dais near the king. "Get away from His Majesty," James ordered, leveling his pistol at Genevieve's head. The ballroom was now a standoff. On the floor, Sebastian groaned, rolling onto his side, clutching his bleeding arm. Kate rushed the final few steps, falling to her knees beside him. "Sebastian," she wept, her hands hovering over his wound. "Oh God, you're hurt." "I told you." He gritted out a bloody smile, touching his pale lips. "I'd burn the palace down." Kate kissed his forehead, then stood up. Her hands were stained with the blood of the man she loved. She turned to the crowd, to the confused peers, and finally to the dais, where Genevieve stood trembling next to the groggy king. "My lords and ladies," Kate's voice boomed, projecting to the back of the hall. She held up the journal. "You ask why I was banished. You ask why the Duke fights. It is not for love alone. It is for the life of King George." She opened the journal. "This is the diary of my father, the Earl of Vance. He did not die of a heart attack, as you were told. He was murdered because he found this." She ripped a page out and held it up. A receipt. Dated May 4th. For arsenic, hellebore, and nightshade. Signed by the apothecary on Fleet Street. And paid for by the Lady Genevieve. A collective gasp went through the crowd. "Lies!" Genevieve screamed, backing up until she hit the king's throne. She forged it. And this. Kate pulled the letters from her bodice. Correspondence with the Comte de Vaudreuil. Promises of English naval secrets in exchange for French support of her regency, once the king was disposed of. "Read the date," James Sterling shouted from the dais. "August 12th. Kate read. "The very day the king fell ill." All eyes turned to the king. The commotion seemed to have stirred him from his stupor. King George blinked, his heavy lids fluttering. He looked at Genevieve, who was standing beside him, her face a mask of terror. Then he looked at the cup of wine in her hand, the wine she had been urging him to drink all night. "Genevieve," the king croaked, his voice weak but audible. What is in the cup?" "Medicine, Your Majesty." She whispered, her hands shaking so hard the wine sloshed over the rim. Just medicine to help you sleep." "Let the physician taste it," Sebastian called out from the floor, helped to his feet by Lord Holloway. The royal physician, who had been cowering behind the throne, tried to bolt, but two guards caught him by the arms. "Drink it," James Sterling ordered, taking the cup from Genevieve and thrusting it at the doctor. The physician fell to his knees, sobbing. "Please, I cannot. She forced me. She said she would kill my family. It's poison, it's all poison." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Genevieve looked around the room. She saw the hatred in the eyes of the court. She saw the guards turning their weapons toward her. She realized the game was over. Her face twisted into a snarl. With a speed no one expected, she reached into the folds of her silver dress and pulled out a small pearl-handled pistol. But she didn't aim it at Kate. She didn't aim it at Sebastian. She pressed the barrel to the king's temple. "Back!" she screamed. "Back, or the king dies right now!" The crowd screamed. James Sterling froze his own pistol, useless with the king as a shield. "I will not hang!" Genevieve spat, her eyes wild. "I will walk out of here. I will take a carriage to the coast. And if anyone follows me, I will blow the king's brains out." "Genevieve, look at me." Kate stepped forward, walking calmly toward the dais. "Stay back, you witch." "You have lost," Kate said softly, continuing to walk. "The French won't take you. You failed. You have no allies. You have no money. You have nothing but a bullet. I have a hostage. You have a dying man," Kate said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Look at him. He can barely hold his head up. If you kill him, you lose your only shield. And there are 500 people in this room who will tear you apart with their bare hands before you can reload." Genevieve's eyes darted around the room. She saw the truth in Kate's words. She saw the rage in the faces of the mob. Her hand wavered. "Drop it!" Sebastian's voice came from behind Kate. He was limping forward, his sword dragging on the floor. "Drop it and you will face a trial. Shoot and I will carve you into pieces myself." Genevieve looked at Sebastian, the man she had obsessed over, the man she had tried to destroy. She saw the way he looked at Kate. Even bleeding, even dying, he was looking at Kate as if she were the sun. A sob broke from Genevieve's throat. Her hand dropped. "I hate you," she whispered to Kate. "I hate you." In a flash, James Sterling kicked the gun from her hand. The guards swarmed the dais. Genevieve was tackled, screaming and cursing, and dragged away in irons. Sir Roderick, seeing his mistress fall, dropped his sword and surrendered. His head hung low. The danger was over. Kate didn't watch them go. She turned to Sebastian. He had dropped his sword and was swaying on his feet. She ran to him, catching him just as his knees gave way. They collapsed together onto the floor of the ballroom, surrounded by the glittering shoes of the stunned aristocracy. "We did it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the soot and blood. "We won." Sebastian looked up at her, his vision blurring. He reached up with his good hand and touched her cheek. "You came back," he murmured, sounding like he couldn't quite believe it. "I banished you, and you came back. You fought the king for me," she sobbed, pressing her forehead to his. "I would fight the world for you." "Kate." He breathed, his eyes sliding shut. I think I need to rest now." Sebastian. But the Duke of Albury had slipped into darkness. 3 months later. The snow had fallen early in London, draping the city in a blanket of pristine white. But inside the conservatory of the Albury estate, it was eternal spring. The glass walls held back the cold, keeping the air warm and scented, with jasmine and roses. Kate sat on a stone bench, reading a letter. "My dear cousin, the trial is over. Genevieve and Roderick were found guilty of high treason. They will face the executioner at dawn. It brings me no joy, but it brings me peace to know you are safe. The king is recovering well. He has purged the court of the French sympathizers. He asks for you daily, though I suspect it is because he wants to apologize again for the 100th time. I am off to the Americas. London is too loud for me now. Just a catch up news." The voice came from the doorway. Kate looked up, a smile lighting her face. Sebastian stood there. He looked different than he had at the masquerade. The hollows in his cheeks were filled out. The darkness in his eyes was gone. His left arm was still in a sling, a lingering reminder of the night he almost died. But he stood tall and strong. "Just James," Kate said, folding the letter. "He sends his love." Sebastian walked over and sat beside her. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. He did this often now, as if he needed to constantly reassure himself that she was real, that she wasn't a hallucination conjured by his grief. "The king sent a gift," Sebastian said, nodding toward a velvet box on the table. "Another one." Kate laughed. "Last week it was a carriage. The week before, a set of emeralds. This one is different. Open it." Kate reached for the box. Inside, resting on white satin, was a parchment. It was a royal decree. To Lady Kate Vance. "For service to the crown and courage above all others, I hereby restore all titles, lands and dowries seized by the crown. Furthermore, I grant the title of Duchess of Albury, should she choose to accept the hand of her intended." Kate stared at the words. "Duchess. He's a bit presumptuous, isn't he?" Sebastian teased gently. "Assuming you'll say yes." He shifted on the bench, turning to face her fully. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was a sapphire, dark and deep as the ocean, surrounded by small diamonds that looked like stars. "Kate," Sebastian said, his voice serious now, "when I sent you away, I thought I was ending my life to save yours. I thought I would live in the grey for the rest of my days. But you broke down the doors. You climbed through windows. You walked into fire." "I simply wanted my life back," she whispered. "You gave me mine back," he corrected. "I don't offer you a perfect life. My arm may never heal fully. I have enemies. The politics of this city are a pit of vipers. But I offer you my heart, fully and completely, until the day I die. Will you marry me?" Kate looked at the ring, then at the man who had risked treason, exile, and death just to keep her safe. "You banished me once, Sebastian Thorne," she said, a playful spark in her eyes. "And I will spend the rest of my life making up for it," he vowed. "Good." She leaned in, kissing him softly. "Because I'm never leaving again." Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the past. But inside, amidst the blooming roses, a new future had just begun. What a journey from the heart-breaking betrayal in that candlelit study to the explosive confrontation on the ballroom floor. Kate and Sebastian proved that true love isn't just about soft words. It's about fighting for each other when the whole world stands against you. I really loved how Kate transformed from a victim into a warrior. She didn't wait to be rescued. She saved the hero. What did you think of Lady Genevieve's downfall? Did you feel satisfied when the king finally woke up? And most importantly, would you have forgiven Sebastian for banishing her, even if it was to save her life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of historical romance, betrayal, and justice, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share it with a friend who loves a good drama and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, so you never miss the next part of our storytelling saga. Thanks for watching, listening, and I'll see you in the next story.